Good morning, and thank you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our seminar on setting up for success. I'm Jenny, and I have the pleasure of hosting this webinar. For those of you who attended some of our wine events during the Boutinot Virtual Wine Festival, you'll have heard that our passion for wine as a business is also reflected in the people who work within our business, be that people from diverse backgrounds, from different genders, or from different cultures. The purpose of the session today is to share practical advice and examples of developing female talent in the wine industry with the aim of helping and encouraging us all to spot more talent. We'll be in conversation with three experienced and senior women at Boutinot, Collette, Deborah, and Samantha, and joined in a broader context by our friends Julie Goddard and Sarah Abbott, who will be talking about female leadership. I'd also like to add that our Group Managing Director, Dennis Whiteley, is in the audience in support and happy to answer any questions from a male employee point of view. This isn't solely about women. We'll be sharing some slides, we'll be carrying out a poll, and we really hope that you'll take part and answer any questions along the way. So for now, a quick introduction to our lovely panel. I'll start with Collette. Give us a wave, Collette. Collette is head winemaker and estate manager at Henner's Vineyard in Sussex, which is part of the Boutinot Group. We then got Deb, who you might have just seen on a previous webinar, a long-standing colleague at Boutinot and head of our independent sales division. Finally, from Boutinot, master blender, winemaker, very experienced colleague Samantha Bailey, who's joining us from Mâcon in France, and is our go-to person if you want to know anything about the origin of Boutinot. We're delighted to be joined by two talented and experienced professionals, Sarah Abbott. Hi, Sarah, and Julie Goddard. Sarah Abbott, Master of Wine and Managing Director of Swirl Wine Marketing Group, and Julie Goddard, the Success Architect, business psychologist and renowned coach. So again, welcome to you all. I'll now hand over to start the webinar to Julie. Thank you, Julie. Oh, sorry, I'm Sarah. Sarah.
That's all right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and consideration. And I'm going to give you some context. So why we're having this conversation, what's the motivation for us being here and pulling together this very talented and interesting panel. I'd like to start by pulling out our perspective into a broader one. And what we know is that in general, in business, companies where women make up at least 15% of senior management were 50% more profitable than those where fewer than 10% of senior managers were female. So it's a small tipping point that can have a big impact on your bottom line. So there is a very strong business case for looking at increasing your, not just women in leadership, but your diversity in general in leadership. And I'm going to dig down into that in a few seconds, but what we would like to do now is actually ask you as guests, participants, to take a poll. So Felix is going to set up the poll and you should be able to vote on these questions. And the reason we're asking these questions is that when I first started meeting and talking with Julie Goddard, who will come in shortly, I had a really interesting conversation with Julie about what leadership is. And really the great insight I had from that is that it starts as a state of mind and that there are many different ways to show leadership. And of course, the best way to have impact with leadership is when it's combined with authority. But what we want to do is start this conversation and really engage the trade and really learn from real life examples of where that kind of leadership ability results in senior women with authority and impact, and that's what the guests from our panel definitely have. So, how is the poll?
Good, that's good. I've certainly voted.
Okay.
I think it's worth saying, just while we wait for the results of the poll to show up from Felix, that in the conversation that Sarah and I had about leadership, one of the things that we're talking about is it really a position that you have? I mean, that's what we're sort of socialized to think, and we're brought up to think, you know, when I'm a leader, when I have the job title, when I have the desk. Or are we entering a new phase, really, where we're talking about leadership without the traditional authority, where you can act as a leader in your mindset and the influence that you can bring about through that? So I think that's a slightly more liberating way of seeing it. And certainly if you're a woman within the industry and you're not yet in your leadership position and you're feeling a bit frustrated, there's an invitation there to think about how you can become influential by using some of these skills, and how you can empower yourself without necessarily somebody coming along and giving you a name badge or a plaque on the door, or, you know, whatever it is, to sort of validate that there are things that you can do.
Yeah, it doesn't happen from one day to the next, does it? You don't just suddenly become a leader. It's that transition. It's that, you know, sometimes it just hits you completely by surprise. I think the results of the poll, really interesting. Let me at it, 42%, and possibly with the right support, 58%. So there's a willingness, but there's a potential nervousness that we need support or validation to take that step, or to think that we can do it.
What's really encouraging about this poll result is everybody here is up for it to some extent, but I think it's telling that option B, where it says it's the option B answer is possibly with the right support, that there is this need for support to develop this kind of leadership. And I'm sure actually that is universal. And I think in many industries, there is a kind of a leadership talent incubation strategy at the highest level. But I think that certainly in wine, there is an opportunity to develop more of a collaborative industry-wide strategy for this kind of development of the talent, because we are all about our talent. You know, that we're only as good as our people. So great, that was kind of just the answer I was hoping we would get, to be honest. Still, with that broader perspective, there's a lot of research in the business sphere about the impact of diversity policies and equality and inclusion policies. And this is some research conducted actually in global business. And what you can see is that having these kind of policies in place is extremely important in attracting talent. And we do have, Julie and I have prepared some resources. If anyone watching wants to actually access these reports, access some of the latest research on this data, we'd be very happy to share that with you. I also just think that it's worth now talking about the wine trade. And it's, I think, interesting that the data that's available to us in the wine trade on these kind of issues is very limited. There have been some visionary, very inspiring initiatives from people like Jancis Robinson, MW, Gas Gluck. They came together to create a diversity in wine survey, which was a really interesting survey. They had 667 respondents. That survey did indicate some really quite difficult truths or experiences that people were basically really experiencing these barriers to development in wine. Wine Unify in the USA, another fantastic initiative. They've also conducted research. But what we lack in the wine trade is the kind of comprehensive commitment to this research and data which drives policy. So I really applaud, in companies such as Boutinot, initiatives such as those run by the Drink Trust, all of these grassroots initiatives, you know, Regine Lee and colleagues at Women in Wine. There's a lot of great work being done. What we don't yet have is the scale and the joined up policy commitment that will actually make a difference. And I think that is the big challenge for the industry. What we can do is we can work to help each other and to develop that individual talent. But I mean, I do think that really this is a rallying cry for the industry, for the companies with power and influence in the industry to really work together to actually make a big impact and a difference. And I think that will come. I'm now going to pass over to Julie. I met Julie actually through a mutual contact, a mutual friend. And I have started working with Julie myself using her services as a coach. And I found that her insights were so practical and useful. And I wish I'd met her 20 years ago. So one of the things we wanted to really do is, I think in the wine trade, there is a lot of passion and enthusiasm in the wine trade. And we tend to, although there are obviously some major players, there are a lot of independent, great, creative, small companies. But one of the consequences of that is the sort of structured, tactical, personal development can often be very difficult for people to access. So basically, I can't go back 20 years and kind of give myself the gift of this kind of training and insight, but I would really like to make these kind of knowledge and the guidance more accessible. And I think also it's really worth saying that it's not a case of just saying, oh, look, there's a woman who's an amazing winemaker. Isn't that amazing? Wow, it's not like that. The reason for highlighting these stories and for having these conversations with the women who are on our panel is role modeling. And it's that sense of young women in wine will say, oh, that could be me. And it's really as straightforward, I think, as that. I know Julie has more information on the psychological impact of role models. Julie's going to take it from here and really give some kind of psychology-based tactics for starting to develop your leadership skills and mindset. So over to Julie.
Thank you, Sarah. If we have a look at the first section of what we're going to be doing, we're going to look at today habits that might hold us back. But before we do that, I think it's worth just pausing in between that context that Sarah has given about the need for us to have visible role models and to explore why we might not have as many role models as we do. When we look at that, there are two ways of looking at the barriers that we find rise up before us. And if you've heard of a lady called Sheryl Sandberg, she was former COO of Facebook, and she wrote a seminal text, really Lean In. Now, Sheryl said there's two types of barriers. The first is external, and they're really organizational or business barriers. And the second type are internal barriers, and they're problems or habits that we might have within ourselves as individuals that might be holding us back. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking through the latter. We're going to be looking at the internal barriers ourselves, and we're going to be doing that not because we need to fix ourselves or anything to do with that, but because these are things that are in our control. These are things that you can take away immediately and start using and thinking, okay, I can make a difference. Now, if enough of us do that, external barriers, so it makes a lot more sense. But I know I'm very grateful to Boutinot for the opportunity to talk to you all today. I think it really, as Sarah said, we're at this crossroads within the wine industry now where it's becoming more and more important to talk about these things. So it was really important for me today to share with you things that were accessible, positive, and hopefully give you some light bulb moments. So what we have here are a list of 10 habits that a gentleman called Marshall Goldsmith identified back in 2007. And 2007, Marshall Goldsmith, if you've not heard of him, he's a globally renowned coach, and he specializes in working with successful people. And he looked at what habits might hold them back. And originally, he came up with a list of 20. That was in 2007. And at the time, he didn't really drill down into that data. He didn't sort of question, is it the same for men and women? He didn't drill down even further into the diversity arena. He just sort of said, these are the 20 habits that hold successful people back. In 2015, when he came to publish his next book, he found that he was working with more high-performing women, which made him stop and think, are the issues that hold women back the same as the issues that maybe get in the way for men? And he met another researcher, Sally Helgeson, and together they came up with this 10 list of habits that very often trip us up along the way. Now, this isn't saying that they're not numerical. You don't start at number 1 and work yourself down to number 10. You might not identify with all of them, but there might be 1 or 2 on that list that you can really recognize in yourself. So one of the things that I know that I did when I was working up my leadership ladder was I used to get quite annoyed if I did a really good job and delivered on a project to a really high standard, that nobody else really seemed to recognize it. You know, I was waiting for somebody to come to me and say, you know, that was a cracking job, well delivered, you know, you're an excellent ambassador for the business. It just didn't happen. So that ability to self-promote and raise our voice and talk about it sometimes makes us hold back. Another one that you might be looking at, number 6, falling into the perfection trap. You know, if it's not perfect, I've just got to do one more thing and then it will be ready. Or avoiding things if you don't think you've got enough expertise. So these are the 10 things that are in circulation now that women tend to look at, and researchers sort of say, yeah, you probably can identify with more than one. So what in today's session are we going to be looking at with Boutinot? Well, we're going to look at 2 things. We're going to look at strategies that you can use to express your voice. So if number 2 is your thing, or number 6 is your thing, you're going to find some comfort and solace in the strategies and experience of our panel from that section. We're then going to look at setting yourself up for success, because we only had an hour and a half today, so we can't obviously cover everything as much as we would like to, and I'm sure the experience of the panel would clearly cover that. But what we wanted to do is look at the area of resilience. So we're going to be, you know, we've got a wealth of experience on the panel, so we're going to be asking them to share with us some of their stories about what's worked for them when things haven't perhaps gone their way. So we'll move on now. And we'll start by looking at strategies to express your voice. Now, before we go any further with this, I think it's worth just saying why this is an important topic. If women don't speak up, and speaking up involves a risk, because if you open your mouth to say something, then you risk being found to be incorrect or not right, or somebody could take issue with your opinion. Sometimes women lean back and don't speak up. Now, that might seem really, really minor, but if we're not speaking up, if we're not using our voice, then what's happening is we're being invisible before we even start. So your potential is being wasted. By being quiet, you're literally allowing people to potentially take credit for your ideas and how you get going. So that's why this is so important. At George Washington University, it's just worth saying this research as well, which is one of the reasons potentially underlying why women don't speak up as much. It was found that women were interrupted during meetings twice as often as men. It would appear that having a seat at the table is one thing, and getting your voice and your ideas and your opinions heard and actioned is another matter altogether. And when you speak up, all eyes are on you, so you are taking that risk. but not doing so, that can be just as damaging. So perhaps even before we start, reframing that. If you're being quiet, that's a choice you're making. And I'm a big J.K. Rowling fan when I'm not reading psychology, and I truly believe that it's our choices that define who we are. So you can change that immediately. It doesn't matter who you saw yourself as before you join this presentation. Personality is not permanent. And that's not me talking passionate. I'm talking as a psychologist now. We like to put ourselves in boxes. We like to say, I've done the Myers-Briggs personality test. This is who I am. I've done the DISC. This is me. Your brain can change. We can reform habits. All of these things are excellent things to do. So before we go any further, I'd sort of like to draw in our panel now. And sort of one of the things that I'm really interested in from our panel was, what was your experience like when you first became a leader? So you can sort of put your hands up, or I can sort of nominate. I feel a bit like I'm a teacher back in the classroom at this point going, Collette, can you tell us maybe what it was like to be a leader?
Well, for me, I first became kind of a leader, I guess, when I was quite a bit younger. As a winemaker, this is my second career, and I came from a PR background originally. And one of the things in marketing and PR is you typically get responsibilities thrust upon you quite young, and you become a team leader quite young, actually, before you've really got the expertise and the skills to deal with it, if I'm really honest. And looking back, I would now be a much better team leader if I could go back and kind of start again. So to a certain extent, I think people sometimes promote you into a position and give you a title, but they don't give you the skills to recognize who's in your team and how to get the best out of them. And I think in terms of what you've said so far today, the thing that when I look back on and I have now developed going forward is the need to advocate for yourself. And it's kind of a flip of one of the things that you said on your first slide, because when I was a team leader, dealing with young men and young women, everybody was kind of in their early 20s, mid 20s, I suppose. It was really apparent then that the young men were much more equipped to advocate for themselves and kind of would come into reviews or ready to challenge for a pay rise or ready to challenge for a promotion. And the young women were much more reluctant. And as a young woman myself managing that, it was really challenging at times to know how to deal with that. And I think at times I certainly wasn't equipped to deal with it. And over the years, I've learned, I hope, better how to, and I've been supported at that. But that was my first kind of introduction into leadership. It was a bit of a rough time at times. I
think that used to happen quite a lot. Throw you in at the leadership bit, and it's sink or swim. And sometimes when I look back at my first leadership place, excuse me, I can think, gosh, the poor people that were in my team at that time, that I thought I was really doing my best by them.
Well, they called me El Presidente, so that probably gives you an indication of my leadership style at the time.
I think we talk about it quite a lot. We talk about it quite a lot. In often, just because you're good at the day job that you do, you get thrust into a leadership or a management role. That's the sort of the natural progression. And exactly as you both said, you don't always have those skills. You might be good at something else, but you really need some support or some idea of what you're doing. But I guess we're all saying also the benefit of age is helping us a little bit here to look back at that.
Yeah. Deborah, was there anything in what Colette's just shared that resonated with you, or did you have a different experience?
No, absolutely resonated with me, Julie. I think from my perspective, I've seen a sort of arc, because I've been at Boutinot as a young woman going into a woman of a certain age. So I've seen, I guess, how leadership for me has sort of like, as where it's got to, where it's come, where it's sort of like here. But the one thing that resonates with me, and there's two words that came out in your chat there, was support and voice. And I guess in day one, you're not a leader. Well, I wasn't a leader at Boutinot for sure. It's taken a lot of sort of organic sort of growth to do that, which is great. And to me, that's where it's all at. That support to express your voice basically, and not to be prejudged, be it male or female, but particularly as a young woman at Boutinot, not to feel as if I need to say something. I was, and you know, increasingly it's as it is now, just allowed to express your voice, just allowed to make mistakes, just allowed to be yourself, to be authentic. And I think that's been incredibly empowering for me anyway, personally. And you know, and that's sort of, I think, as you were saying, Sarah, that's sort of indicative of the trade as well, in terms of there's a lot of independent small companies, certainly that I've dealt with over the last few years, which are you know, they're the same. They're expressing their voice and being quite challenging back as well. So that's, I suppose, how I've grown into a leadership sort of like position within Boutinot. Really given lots of freedom and support, really.
And you know, that's the ideal way, isn't it? To be allowed to grow into an authentic version of yourself. Very often what we hear is, excuse me, women saying that they've been fed back, can you be more like your male counterpart? Or even take gender out of, you know, can you be more like X or can you be more like Y? And actually what you need to do is really be more like you and find that space to find out what leadership means for you. Samantha, what was your journey into leadership like?
Very much like Deborah in reality, because when I started at Boutinot, the team was just so tiny. There was just one leader at the time, who happened to be Mr. Paul Boutinot. And his idea was, well, if you can do the job, get on and do it as it needs to be done. So thrown in at the deep end, but gently. And over the years, the business has changed. The number of people within the business has grown. But because of where I started, I think I managed to gain people's appreciation and respect for the job that I'm actually able to do in the wine field. So my job is more in the wine field than in the leadership field, but it is this notion of respect that comes in every day. If you do your job and you do it well, then people will stop and listen to you. If you want to speak, it's not a question of, can I say something? As long as you argument in the correct manner and you can prove that what you're saying is valid and helps the business progress or puts the quality of the wine up to the fore, then that is what is important. So for me, it's respect that is the key word.
And I think absolutely, because it's difficult to lead in any manner, whether it's, you know, like that, if you haven't got anybody following you. And I think credibility and respect and things like that go hand in hand, don't they? One of the questions that I really wanted to ask, which sort of follows on quite nicely from that, was if we could clone everybody. That's quite a scary thought, but just bear with me because there's a lot of power and potential and awesomeness in the room. But let's say we could double it. And then we also could invent a time machine and we traveled back. So your older self now could meet you, let's say when you're about 13, because that's when you're quite formative then, aren't you? For experiencing the world. What one piece of advice would you give your younger self?
Ooh, relax. It's not, the world continues to turn. I guess again, one of your points, Julie, in that list of 10 was you talk about a job and career, and you know, for me again, it just from a personal point of view, it was a job. Whereas actually, I think if I'd have actually thought, well, I am going to go into a career, that would have actually changed the mindset for me personally. That's a personal thing. But yeah.
Thank you.
I think for me, it's that when you said about kind of staying true to your authentic self, I think probably I knew who I was actually when I was 13 or 14, but I didn't really recognize that I liked that version of myself because everyone else was more cool or more popular or more X, Y, and Z. And it took me quite a long time to make peace, I guess, with the version of myself that has turned out to be pretty good and pretty successful and pretty tenacious and determined at whatever I turn my hand to. And I think if I could go back and tell myself, relax is the right word, like you'll be okay, because actually people will value what you bring to it. don't have so much doubt. I think that's what I'd say.
You look at 13-year-olds on the external side. If you ever see a crowd of them at the bus stop, they're all like full of confidence. But inside, when we reflect on ourselves, what we were like back then, it is this. These are really, really good things.
Yeah, Jenny, both actually. I think that list of the 10 things that you showed, Julie, were really pertinent and probably apply to a lot of people, irrespective of gender. But I think particularly for women, I think when you're 13, you're sort of taught to think, right, what is my career going to be? I've got to make those decisions now. I've got to be good. I've got to be the final. Develop the final person at 18, 19, 21, 22, you can't possibly be. But I think looking back, I wish I had a little bit more confidence in the fact that I could turn my hand to different things. I think I'd tell younger girls to be confident, to always challenge, Deb, as you said, and I think Samantha said as well, you are able to challenge respectfully at Boutinot. There is no issue with that, no matter where you are, where you come from, as long as you do it in the right way. But I think that little bit of confidence would have probably, just to say, it's going to be okay. You've got a long career ahead of you. It doesn't have to be done by the time you're 23.
There is those things. When I'm 30, I'm going to be. When you get to 30, like, I'm nowhere near where I thought I could be. And that's okay too. I think sometimes what holds us back when we label it up as confidence, because the research shows us, generically, again, really broad brush strokes here, but most women are confident about their skill set. We get this whole story through the media. Women need to be more confident. We get bombarded with imposter syndrome. All of these things. Now, actually, women are confident about their skill set. What they're not so confident about is how to navigate in the workspace, or, yes, I'd like some support with leadership skills. And I think it goes back to possibly that need for things to be perfect.
I think you're right. Definitely that perfection. Yeah. Thinking you have to be able to do the job on day one rather than learning with it. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah. Samantha, I haven't asked you yet. 13-year-old you.
Well, it's quite interesting, actually, because 13-year-old me, gosh, I lived in the sticks down in the south of England, and I was far from imagining any form of career at that age. And it was just a question of be yourself, go and discover and pick up any experience that you can. And retrospectively, I've got 2 girls who are now 20 and 25. I've always said to them, be yourself. If you have an idea of what you want to do, get on and do it. Have confidence in your own qualities and go forth and conquer. That's the advice that I gave to my girls. And I think that's because that is what I did in my own younger life. Yeah. And I think that is still very, very relevant to young people today. You can't know at 13 what you want to do in terms of a career. But if you are able to forge enough personality and speak your own mind, respecting other people at the same time, then that is the best way to move forward.
I think I'm hearing, like, if I was to do like a word cloud of words that keep getting mentioned, right? Authentic, respect, relaxing. These are all words that are sort of coming out. So
can I just come in very quickly on that, Julie?
Of course you can, Sarah.
I think so. I'm an auntie, and my nieces and nephews are in their 20s, and they're getting out there, and they're finding their path. And something that I was told that I wish I could say to my 13, 14-year-old self is nothing in your experience is ever wasted. Yeah. And I mean, I've had a part-time job, a Saturday job since I was 13. I was working on the greengrocer's stall in the market. That experience was not wasted. I think especially when you're in the early stages of your career, I mean, often you are doing jobs which can feel like a bit of a slog. I mean, I remember I was selling wine and I was getting into this Peugeot 306 and driving 200 miles to go and sell wine to new business, and it was tough. And And it can really feel like, what am I doing? You know, this isn't making any difference to anything, but it was not wasted. And if you have all those things inside you and you know who you are, and actually you have respect for yourself and for others, the stuff you are learning in the early stages of your career is actually part of your arc. If you're on that path, it's really part of your arc. And I again, I kind of wish I'd kind of been more aware of that in that kind of early stage of my career, because it can be tough sometimes. It's exhausting, and I think that leadership is a type of creativity, really, and it's tough to be to maintain that if you're tired. Whereas if you know there's a purpose, if you have faith that there's a purpose in what you're doing, it's much less tiring, I think.
I think you're absolutely right there with what you're saying, Sarah. And I think everything that goes into that mix, there's nothing, no matter what's happened previously, that you can't draw strength from, or you can't reframe in a way that goes, that's given me. What was the lesson within that? What did that teach me? And it makes us, that old adage of, that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And there's something sort of empowering about looking at something that hasn't worked too well and going, well, what can I draw from that? Where on my arc am I? And I like that, because for me, I'm seeing that upward sweep, which is something we all need to sort of visualize. So in terms of what strategies for our audience today can I take away with them? Just sort of 3 things in addition to what the panel have said. If you're going for an interview or you're thinking about applying for another job, as women, we have a tendency to use the we pronoun a lot. And I fell into this trap myself personally. I went for a CEO position in an organisation. It was going amazingly well. And at the end, the feedback that I got, obviously didn't get that position at that time, was you used we a lot, and it was difficult for us to know exactly what you were responsible for. Now, I refer to my team as we all the time, our vision, our goals, what we want to do. So whilst it might not sit too comfortably, don't swap out one for the other. And the golden rule for everything is, if it isn't authentic, if it doesn't feel right to you, then you stick by what feels right for you. But in that specific situation, it might help to look at reclaiming your ambitions and your achievements and what you've done, and stating that simply using the I pronoun. Women also tend to use the word I'm sorry more frequently, but they do it in a way where if somebody's had a bad day, you go, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And you're doing it as a way of expressing empathy with the other person. The downside to that is if you fall into that particular trap and you do that a lot, people are hearing that from you a lot, and that's equated with possibly being a bit more weak. So that can have a negative dampening effect. And then I put words to erase from your vocabulary. If you just took 1 or 2 of these, if you say just, please stop. I'm just doing that. No, you're doing something, So, and then I put words to erase from your vocabulary. Sorry, that's a mistake on my behalf. Sometimes we need to put a hand up, so that's my bad. But we also use it in another way where we go, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry that I just need to do this. If you can hear any of those patterns in your speech, then awareness is the first step to changing that. So that, again, is something. Saying, I think. Just stop. It's a filler. And if you try it in your head and you still say what you were going to say, but when I think, you come across 10 times more confident. So 3 little things in addition. The communication style between men and women in general tends to be a bit different. And it becomes to be different because of how women are perceived when they're acting as leaders, generally speaking. Can't say that enough, generally speaking. But one of the exercises that I sometimes do when I work with companies is I go, can you write down adjectives, lots of adjectives that you associate with being a leader? And we'll get bold and confident and assertive. And then I go, what adjectives can you write down, I think, that you associate with being a man? And, what adjectives can you write down that you associate with being a woman? And what we'll see is a massive difference. There's almost no difference between men and women. There is between the women in leadership. And when women are leading, sometimes, and this is all unconscious, what tends to happen is people don't like that. They don't like the energy. So let me just give you a really short example. A man can really get away with working on a Friday night, handing something to you and going, "Oh, I'm really, can you," no, they wouldn't say, "I'm sorry." You see what I did there? I just modelled what not to do. They would hand you the report and go, "Can I have that on Monday, please?" And we would hear the please. So we would go, okay, he was in a rush, but he said, please. If a woman did that, "Can I have that on Monday, please?" they would be perceived as being abrupt, maybe too direct, too demanding. So the communication style we need to adopt needs to be a little bit different. So we probably have to have a little bit of a chat first. You know, how's your day gone? Soften it a little bit, then ask for the report. All of that is a little bit time consuming. However, it is necessary sometimes to set ourselves up for success, which segues very nicely into our next section of looking at what is going to set us up for success. And as I said earlier, this is going to look at resilience levels and things that we can use to keep our buoyancy when things are really taxing us. Now, there are many different definitions out there for what being resilient means. So let's share one and adopt that for today. My personal definition is resilience is our ability to deal with unpredicted change. And the reason I put unpredicted in is when you are at leadership level, quite a lot of the time, you are leading the change. And when that happens, you're quite comfortable because you've got some semblance of control in what happens. And I very often hear leaders say, "I'm very comfortable with change." And then I go, yeah, but what happens when you're not in control? That's a different matter altogether. And certainly the last 15 months have given us a real example of having to cope when the unexpected hits us. So I'd like to ask the panel, what lessons do you think the pandemic has brought the industry, and how has it tested your leadership skills?
Can I go for it?
I'll start then. I'll start. My team have always been 50% based in the UK and 50% based overseas, often working individually, alone, with dodgy IT connections and all sorts of things. Me being in the office, in control with a group of people, was relatively easy when I look back. Working from home on my own, I have developed, I think, a greater empathy for others in my team who live alone and work alone in a different environment. And previously it would be, I'd see them every day, I'd chat to people in the office, but those guys you sort of, you see less of. So I would say resilience for me has been adapting style and developing empathy, but practical, looking at practical ways of improving that working relationship with my team. And I think a lot of that will continue as well. I think we've all learned a lot from it. So that's been my personal experience of managing a sales team.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I'd echo that, Jen. I put down, I was thinking about this, and I put down almost every day in the pandemic, continuing to work. It was almost like going out and it was 4 seasons in one day. So at one stage you'd have to put a mac on, the other stage you'd have to, put your head to the sun. It was learning so many different, I suppose it was adapting to so many different things. And as a woman, it was family first, Boutinot for second. It was really sort of trying to manage all that in quite difficult, stressful circumstances. So resilience levels have gone really high, and empathy levels, as you say, Jen, and a different type of empathy, I think, in terms of trying to protect as well as just hearing, and protect lots of different things. The other thing I found about the wine trade, which was fantastic, but also challenging in very, very many ways, was that readaptation of the trade, of certainly from within the independent sector, lots of businesses just changed overnight. and had to, they were forced to. So that was something to be really, really great to see, but difficult to manage as well. But come out of it as obviously stronger and different, as you say, Jen. More, I suppose, more understanding. You would hope. You would hope, I'm sure. And again, coming back to the Boutinot sort of foundation, the great thing that I found again was that big sort of like holler that we're going to make mistakes here. It is unprecedented. We've never seen this in our lifetime. So it was that support again, in terms of okay, there'll be mistakes and we'll just get over them. But hopefully that culture of treating people right has been that thread really. So yeah, it's certainly resilience is the right word, Julie.
I think it's interesting, Deborah, what you were saying about making mistakes along the way, and are they mistakes or are they missteps? From a learning sort of lens, which is what we do. As women, we tend to think like that, and I think you're absolutely right in your attitude of we'll get there in the end, and treating people with respect. There's definitely something to be said for that along the way. So I'll move on to the next question, if I may. Thinking more broadly over your career to date, can you reflect on a time perhaps when things didn't go so well for you, and how did you manage to turn that around? Builds quite nicely on what you've just said, Deborah, so I thought thank you for the link.
I think okay, I'll go first, and it actually ties into. We've had a couple of interesting questions as well from the audience, and I think this links quite nicely as well. Julie, going back to the 10 habits as well. I think for me, in the early days of my career in the wine industry, because I had a previous life as well that I was pretty successful at relatively. And coming into the wine trade, I had a skill set, but absolutely no knowledge of wine. And a couple of years in, as my role was growing and with no qualifications under my belt and no real experience in wine, surrounded by a lot of people who are very experienced in Boutinot, it was quite easy to have a wobble back then and think, well, actually, I can't do this wine thing because it's so scary and there are so many people who are so qualified and know so much about it. And if it wasn't for, having that support from a couple of people, male and female, a couple of people who I'll never forget, to get you through that and talk to you about that and say qualifications aren't everything. And I think that we've had one question from the audience. I'll just read out saying, number 3, actually, overvaluing expertise is especially interesting in context of wine, where you could say there's a defined hierarchy of expertise, i.e. WSET, MS, MW. It doesn't necessarily equate to positions of leadership. And I think, we look at that. We do look at that in wine every day. The subject of wine is quite scary. But if you've got a passion for wine, how do you marry that wine with leadership? Do you necessarily need the exams, the qualifications to do that? So long story short, I would say challenge for me would also overcoming the lack of education in wine and marrying that up with a different skill set to become a leader.
And for me, a lot of that kind of does resonate, and I come at it from a slightly different perspective because I'm on the production side of things. And as I've said before, I came to it a bit late. I came to it in my early 30s as a female, and some of the very real challenges and some of the challenges in my head are the physicality involved in a lot of what I do. And I was never the fittest or strongest person, and it could have been something that I had, real or not, held me back because I wasn't sure whether I had the physical strength to take on a lot of the roles that I might be looking at. And over the years, that kind of building up of resilience was to kind of physically take myself out of the space, if you like, and give myself a pep talk where I did have to seriously analyze what my strengths are, what can I bring to the role, because ultimately what you also want is someone that's pulling their team together to recognize that you can't have 10 people all with the same skill sets. their role is to put together a team that can do the job. And therefore I had strengths and skills within that team that contribute to it. And that really came to life when I was working in a cellar in California. It was a very, very male dominated cellar with a lot of Latin American workers, very generalized, but there weren't a lot of white women in their 30s in the cellar. And I said to the cellar master kind of at the end of my internship, you know, why did you hire me? Because like, I've worked really hard. I've never worked harder, but it struck me that I was the odd one out in the cellar. And he said, well, because ultimately I need a team of people that bring different strengths. And if I need, and this is a stereotype, but if I need men to lug things up and down ladders, I've got a cellar full of those. I was looking at the skill sets that you bring in terms of organization, experience, kind of managing attention to detail from what you had before. And that's what I needed in the team at that time. And that for me was a real confidence boost, because it, you know, I was only in my second year of training as a winemaker, and it showed me that there was an absolute path to success for me, because ultimately successful teams are ones that draw on, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, putting together the right pieces, whether you're in that team or whether you're leading the team. You don't want to clone all the same success. You need to recognize what you need in the team. And so that made me take real heart in the fact that I had a role in the wine production industry, and kind of that really set me off for the future, and recognizing the strengths that I can bring to the team as a result of that.
I think Collette, that lesson, that experience that you just shared is phenomenal. You know, if you're out there and you only take one piece away from today, I mean, shame on you, number one, but number two, it would be a very good thing to take away. I'm an accredited strengths profiler, and I think when you realise as a leader, you don't have to know everything, do everything. What you do have to do is pull together your team so that as a team, you can do all those things. And then you have a responsibility to know where your areas of weakness are, so that somebody else can come in and be your shield maiden, if you like, you know, have that in the skill set that they bring. So, you know, that's really interesting to hear. Samantha or Deborah, would either of you like to share?
I guess one of the other things that, you know, when things have gone wrong, we always, well, I do, I self-evaluate every day. I always sort of like think, oh, actually, what can I learn from that about myself, really? And actually, I'm changing my role in Boutinot in the next sort of like few months, and I'm learning a huge amount. And actually, I'm learning a huge amount from some of the new, you know, some of the younger people, which is great, you know. And I think that's another sort of like thing that we need to, well, I need to sort of establish is just to continue to be curious and to continue to have an open mind about everything. You know, we don't know if I don't know everything. I want to learn something every day, and I think, you know, evaluating that on a day-to-day basis, and then filtering it into actually how can I use that I've just learned to make things better. So I think that for me is something that's well, hopefully will always be there for me.
Yeah. Samantha?
Yeah, I very much agree with Deb. There's always something in our lovely world of wine. There is always something to learn, because we have to remember that wine in its own right is affected by vintage, and every vintage gives us something different. So within our overall environment, we can say it's an ever-changing environment. So let's learn from yesterday, see what we can do today, and hopefully make tomorrow a little easier.
Love that.
And I think that the learning and sharing the experience is a very important part of what we do at Boutinot. We're not individuals working on our own. We are part of a team, and it is sharing our experiences and consolidating all of that block of information, influence, attributes all together that makes us as a business a stronger business.
I think so. It's been wonderful to listen to you all about, you know, what you value by working at Boutinot, and the atmosphere that it allows you to adopt a growth mindset, by which I mean that you can learn, that you can grow, that you can be your authentic self. and go about is is really to be commended. Just looking at, I'm aware that we're moving into sort of like the final 5 minutes of our, which is a shame because it's flown, but there are certain things I want to sort of cover in the last 5 minutes with us. So a few strategies for our audience. If you're stuck on overwhelm, I have a little mantra that is just progress over perfection. So, and it makes me feel better, even if I'm having really tough days, to sort of think, you know, there's one thing, I'm just going to pick one thing and move forwards on that. You know, what's the one thing that will move your needle the most that day? So that when you come to the end of that day, you can think, yeah, I've still moved forward. The second thing, failure means different things to different people. I'm aware sometimes when I say the word failure, you can physically see people react to that word. And as women, we've talked about the perfection trap earlier. The other one is what we fondly refer to as the disease to please. So we're socialized to want to bring everybody on board and on side, and sometimes, you know, that gets in the way, and so we react badly to failure because in our heads we equate that to letting people down. Men and women, generally speaking, tend to see failure differently. Men tend to see business more as a bit like a ball game, a team sport. So if something doesn't go well, they'll tend to see it as the game is still in play. You know, who can I substitute? Who can I bring on board to help me? You know, if I'm injured or I know I'm not going to make that deadline, who can I pass that work on to so it still gets over the line without seeing that as a failure on a personal or professional level ourselves? Women tend to see things more as in terms of like the rules of the classroom. So, you know, it's a pass or a fail. There's a grade attached to it. You know, how did I do? Tell me how I did. And, you know, that pronoun comes again. So seeing your team, opening up to that, maybe that metaphor of operating as a team of people in a game can actually be quite empowering, because when the going gets tough, it reminds you that there are people around you, you know, that you can call on, as Collette said, for their strengths. Maybe their strengths are exactly what you need in that moment to get through. So final question to the panel, and this is a difficult one, but if you can keep it brief for us, it'd be appreciated. I did ask you if you could share what your recipe for career success, what would that be? And again, you don't all have to answer, and Sarah, you might wish to sort of join us and share what you want, but what would your recipe for career success look like?
Isn't there yet?
Well, can I just say one little anecdote? Actually, one of the things that I found out when I was 24, when I got this job, was the very reason I got it was because I smiled at the interview. So there you go. So always smile.
Positivity works wonders, doesn't it?
I think that sense of that self-belief is so important, and to feed it wherever you can. And I remember when I was, 24, I had my first job in wine. I was taken on by a really smart wine importer, and I had marketing experience, I had IT experience, but I was brand new to wine. And one of my colleagues there mocked me for mispronouncing the name of a wine. It was a Burgundy specialist, and he said, "I think you'll find it's pronounced Montrachet." And I was like, you could have just told me. I think that's when I decided, right, I'm going to be a master of wine, because, and I think it's okay to kind of acknowledge that, sometimes you just have to have that fire in your belly. And actually, I find that if you're underestimated, use it. I think it's fine to use it, and it's fine to be passionate. And that has really propelled me.
Isn't there, Sarah? There's a t-shirt that says, "Go on, underestimate me, it'll be fun."
Yes.
and that's exactly what you did. You took that and then you went, "I'm going to take it to the next level." I'm just aware, sorry, Sarah, I know I'm cutting you. I'm just aware that we did say that we would take questions from the audience. And I don't know whether we've got any more questions and answers coming, or whether I can hand back to the panel.
At the moment you can hand back to the panel, I think. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, Sarah, very sorry to interrupt you. Press play.
I was on mute. Okay, practical question. This is the poll. What would the audience like to see that would help them develop their leadership potential? And just select any of these that you feel would apply.
There's an interesting mix coming in, isn't there?
Yeah, I thought this would happen. I mean, I personally think that it's structural change that makes the difference. I don't know if anyone's seen the latest drinks retailing news publication, which brings out every year 100 most influential people in wine retail. Great publication, interesting listing. Of the top 50, basically 10 are women. And the number of and the representation from diversity is even smaller. So we've talked about here what we can do, but I think these kind of structures, obviously in some companies, it is happening, it happens organically. But I think really what you need to change this is for leading companies to come together to think about how they can make these things happen, how they can share positive role models, what kind of personal development and training in leadership, and especially this, something I've learned a lot about from you, Julie, this sponsorship from senior colleagues, not just mentorship, but sponsorship, I think is really important.
Just to sort of clarify what Sarah means by that, is a mentor is someone who will share their skills and experiences with you. If you find somebody who's willing to be your sponsor, they'll take it one step further. They'll go, I will actively promote you. So I will keep my ear to the ground for opportunities that I think I'll speak up on your behalf, where it's necessary at meetings. So there is a danger, generally speaking, that women seek mentors, and actually what we need is sponsors or something else, because it tends to reveal more of that waiting for somebody else to recognize what you're good at and help you along the way, when really empowering ourselves to take place in addition to, you want somebody else, an ally, male or female, who will act as a sponsor, who will actively promote you. I think, Sarah, given on what you said about we've only talked about one sort of barrier today, as we said at the beginning. 20% of our audience say being given the chance. So hopefully that speaking up element would have been helpful to you. 24% of our audience seeing and reading about positive role models. Now, that just says why this panel is so important today, that the women from Boutinot, coming and saying, look, and sharing stories about their career. Sometimes we think, have I really got anything to share? I'm not really anything special. I just do my job. But actually, there's a danger that we can devalue our own experiences by assuming that everybody else knows. And sometimes your experience can be somebody else's gold dust. So if you have the opportunity to stand up, talk, be on a podcast, reach out for it, because there's a definite need for more positive role models. And 29% of our audience said mentorship and sponsorship. So there's definitely a need out there, a desire out there for more. And on that note, if you would like to stay in touch, Sarah and I are very excited to be launching the blend. We've got a series of 3 workshops coming up, which will be delivered as a package. The website is now live. So after we finish today, if you want to head over there, if you're interested in more development and staying in touch, you can register your expression of interest. We're going live with the workshops in September. So also, Sarah said, we've got resources and things like that. Our contact details are both Our email addresses are below. You can check out our presenter tabs on here as well to find out more. I'm going to hand back to Jenny. I'm just going to Sarah, is there anything you want to say before I hand back to Jenny quickly?
I'd just like to thank you. I blessed the day I met you, Julie. And also I'd really like to thank Jenny and Felix and Jess, who first approached us to do this. And of course, the amazing women from Boutinot, Samantha, Deborah and Collette. Thank you very much. And thank you for all of the audience who've taken the time to join us. We know things are getting a lot busier now, and we do really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, panel. On behalf of everybody here, and I really hope everybody at home in their office has got something out of today. The idea was to be uplifting and positive and to put some experiences out there. I will have all of the details for Julie and Sarah if you want to get in touch, so please don't hesitate to contact me, Felix and Jess. A massive thank you for all the work behind the scenes and putting this together. Load of questions have come in, Julie, Sarah, so I think you will probably get some feedback from this. But to my lovely colleagues at Boutinot, thank you as well for participating. Great to see you. I hope to see you face to face again really, really soon, be that in Sussex, France, Deb, even in Manchester. How about that? Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.